4 heroic bishops raised their voices with a public act of reparation, denouncing, in their own words, the abomination that took place in the very heart of the Vatican. It's a public, powerful act that everyone should know about, because it marks a turning point, the moment when tensions within the Church can no longer be silenced. Stay with us. Last Saturday, in the tense silence of Pittsburgh, an act took place that shook more than one conscience inside and outside the walls of the Vatican. 4 bishops, figures known for their doctrinal firmness, have publicly pronounced an act of reparation, denouncing in no uncertain terms what they define as a moral and spiritual deviation encouraged, they say, by the authorities of the Holy See themselves. The occasion was the Conference on Catholic Identity, an increasingly important gathering in the American ecclesiastical landscape, often accused of representing the most intransigent wing of contemporary Catholicism, but which in reality defends what many believe to be the perennial truth. The words spoken in that hall had the weight of a whiplash. The prelates didn't name names, but the reference to a recent event in St. Peter's Basilica, a march that shocked many Catholics, was clear. According to the signatories, Rome itself opened its doors to an act that openly contradicts the 6th commandment, allowing the most sacred place in Christianity to become a showcase for the exaltation of sin. The message launched by the 4 bishops is not just a protest, but an act of spiritual resistance. At a time when doctrine seems to be bowing to worldly pressure, they are choosing the opposite path: denunciation, reparation, and public prayer. A direct challenge to the ambiguity and silence of those who, at the top of the Church, should guard the truth, and instead, as the signatories argue, seem to want to rewrite it. The heart of the 4 bishops' speech was the act of reparation, a solemn and public prayer that, while avoiding direct names, took on the unmistakable tone of an indictment. In the text, the prelates complain that some authorities of the Holy See were complicit in what they define as an abomination that took place in St. Peter's Basilica last September 6th. That day, according to the bishops, the most sacred temple in Christianity hosted a demonstration that transformed the house of God into a worldly stage, where pride in certain behaviors was displayed as a right to be celebrated. The complaint concerns not only the episode itself, but its symbolic significance. Allowing such an event to occur in the heart of the Catholic faith, the bishops argue, is tantamount to tacitly approving a moral reversal, a reversal of the meaning of sin and grace. The text is clear. The Church cannot become a platform to proudly support the legitimization of fornication and other sins against the 6th commandment. In those words, we sense the pain of shepherds who see the Father's house desecrated not by external enemies, but by those who should guard it. The tone is firm, but not resentful. There is no spirit of revolt, but rather a call to the sacred. A call not to remain silent in the face of what scandalizes the little ones and confuses consciences. The protagonists of this gesture are 4 bishops now known throughout the Catholic world for their firmness and courage: Athanasius Schneider, Marian Eleganti, Robert Mutzarts, and Joseph Strickland. For them, love for the Church is not measured by consensus, but by the courage to defend the truth even when it stings. The text of the Reparation Act forcefully presents an accusation that spares no one. The bishops openly denounce the presence, within the Church itself, of pressure groups working to change Catholic morality, presenting as gestures of inclusion, what in reality, according to perennial doctrine, remains an offense to divine law. They speak of a silent but organized action, of a network that leverages the language of mercy to introduce a new vision of sexuality and moral life, far from tradition and the usual magisterium. It is no secret that some prominent cardinals and prelates have recently called for a revision of the Church's moral teaching, pushing for a sort of pastoral updating. The signatory bishops, however, define these attempts as shameless appeals, true acts of rupture with the doctrine that Christ himself delivered to the apostles. Their language is direct, devoid of nuance. Whoever seeks to change what the Church has always taught, they say, betrays not a human rule, but the very truth of the gospel. This denunciation does not arise from an academic dispute, but from a spiritual drama. The bishops warn that the greatest risk is not explicit dissent, but the confusion spreading among the faithful today, disoriented by ambiguous words and symbolic gestures that seem to seek to reconcile the irreconcilable. Their prayer, therefore, becomes an act of defense, not against the world, but against the internal corruption that threatens to transform the Church into a spineless institution, ready to bend to every cultural wind. In the final part of the prayer, the four bishops address their invocations to God in a grave and penitential tone, asking forgiveness not only for public scandals, but also for those who, with their words and blessings, end up confusing what is holy with what is not. They prayed, in particular, for those who maintain that God created and desired disordered inclinations, and for those who, in the name of false compassion, go so far as to impart blessings to unions that the Church has always considered contrary to divine law. According to the bishops, this trend represents a form of theological blasphemy, because it attributes to God what he himself, in Revelation, has always condemned as the fruit of moral disorder. Prayer, therefore, is not only an act of reparation for an offense, but also a cry of alarm. Faith risks being rewritten under the guise of tenderness. At that moment, the silence in the Pittsburgh hall was almost palpable. Those present, religious, lay and entire families, joined together in a spirit of profound reflection, aware that they were witnessing something more than a simple ceremony. It was a gesture of fidelity, a declaration of belonging, an act of love for a church that, though wounded, remains the bride of Christ. The four bishops kneeling were not asking for vengeance or reform, but for conversion. And that word, conversion, seemed to sum up the entire meaning of their battle. To resist not out of pride, but out of love for the truth. Yet, the climate among the faithful and part of the clergy is one of growing exasperation, the feeling that enough is enough, that the patience of believers attached to the same old doctrine is reaching its limit. The example of Monsignor Strickland, removed after his repeated public positions, stands as a warning. Many wonder if the same fate could befall other pastors who have chosen the path of evangelical frankness. It would be the definitive sign of a profound change, in which unity would be invoked not to guard the truth, but to silence those who dare to remember it. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment Amen. God bless you.